So, hello everybody. My name is Thad Martin. I'm actually the director for higher education for the west of Acquia, which means that basically everybody up from Texas to here through Minnesota, and everybody west of that from a higher education perspective I work with. So, the Minnesota project where they've retooled things on Drupal, UCLA who's doing the same thing. Prior to that, I worked with a lot of clients in the central US who were really newly adopting Drupal and talking to them and to their teams about how to get enabled on Drupal, how to learn more about it, how to really start their understanding of it, that start of that curve that Joe was talking about. And really, before that, I was working at a proprietary platform. So I'm only 4.5 years into Drupal, and I like to think I still have a little bit of a perspective of what it was like when I first started to get some exposure to it. So what I want to do with you guys now is take you through some of the high-level concepts, the high-level functionality. We can start to go deeper depending on if you guys are still with me or not. But really just so, I saw there are a lot of people who are here new. Who's relatively new to Drupal? Okay, perfect. Who's a little more advanced? Anybody? Handful? Okay. So I think we'll be able to slide more towards that through the session. A quick touch on what I'm actually going to walk through. So this is a site that we actually use when we're actively selling Drupal to people who are considering it against other CMS platforms. So one of the things Acquia as an organization ran into, and Acquia was founded by Dries Buytaert, who was Drupal's original creator, who provides support services platforms for organizations that are adopting Drupal. In the early days of Acquia, we had this assumption that people would find their way into Drupal, find that it was a great tool, use it for their organization, and then they would find their ways naturally to us as they needed help and as they needed sort of an enterprise service. What we've come to understand is there are a lot of proprietary tools that are actively selling their capabilities as being better than Drupal. And so we actually had to develop the ability within Acquia to present Drupal to people who had never seen it before and understand what it was, how it worked, and why it would be better than those other tools. And so in part of that, we developed this site, which is what we take prospects through. This site is actually built on a distribution of Drupal. And if you think about the analogy that gets used with Drupal all the time, it's Lego. So you have all these pieces of functionality that make up modules. And when we talk about Drupal, we talk about it as an assembled experience. So this idea that you can build a Drupal site without necessarily having to write a line of PHP code or actually do development. Instead, there's this wealth of modules out there that you can use to put together a site that has the functionality that you want it to have. So that concept of modules and encapsulating functionality is one of those key terms that gets thrown around in Drupal. The issue is when you start talking about that to somebody who's new to it, this is the picture they get in their head. And they're like, this doesn't look like an easy thing to me. This looks like a lot of work before I even know what I'm doing. Where's the instruction sheet? So what a distribution of Drupal is actually a pre-built Lego set. So it's a set of functionality, a set of modules that have actually been put together and packaged together to produce something that actually, isn't just a box of Legos to go and play with. And so this site I'm going to take you through was actually built on a distribution that Acquia has made and curated called Lightning. And the idea behind Lightning was to take enterprise content authoring, mostly a marketing focus, and go in and have people, give them a place to start where they got a lot of that basic core website functionality out of the box. And the reason I kind of said that this would be about both, a lot of the authoring experience and a lot of the way that people use the front end of the system within Drupal existed for Drupal 7. As it was being built and improved for Drupal 8, with that improved focus on content authors, it was actually backported to Drupal 7 first. And so what Lightning does, there's a Drupal 7 and a Drupal 8 version of it. Both of those versions essentially have a consistent authoring experience. So an author who has gone through managed content, worked in Lightning for Drupal 7, when they go to Drupal 8, they actually have the same experience. So it's familiar patterns, it's the same type of interface for them. So that's just kind of to lay what I'm talking about. This site is built on this concept of this pre-built Lego set. Does that make sense to everybody? So the other thing, and this is depending on how new you are to Drupal, we actually have to have the conversation sometimes that Drupal is both a CMS for creating websites and the mechanism that those websites are actually generated and delivered to visitors to the website itself. You have a lot of systems that were basically improvements on Microsoft front page or different tools that were used to create a website, and then that got handed over to a server and the server delivered it. So when we have a Drupal website and we're doing the authoring and working within Drupal, we're actually logging into that same system that's delivering the content to users. Everybody do that, right?
So is Drupal underneath using Acquia or anything like that, or is it really using just its own thing?
So Drupal 8 is an application built on the Symfony PHP framework. And then that application needs a LAMP stack or somewhere to run it. So the Drupal application does all the things like storing the content, how people can create content, the interfaces for that, how content is delivered, but it does need to run as a PHP application on a web server somewhere. Does that make sense?
Okay, so you need some kind of web server that does PHP.
Yes.
Okay.
And that web server is going to serve the visitors to that site as well as the content authors who are coming in and actually working with the site.
Okay.
Drupal is good at a couple things that have really sort of set it apart from other systems. The first is the presentation of the site is very separate from the actual content of the site itself. So the theming and the way that the colors look and the way that different pieces of content look, you sort of define those separately from whoever's coming in and actually editing the content itself. Same thing with functionality. So what I've done is I've logged into the site, and being logged into the site gives me access to this nice little menu up top. The first thing I'll tell you guys, there is a concept within Drupal around users that have administrative privileges called roles. A role determines who has access to what in the system. So as an administrator, I see all of these options. When Drupal is being initially deployed, one of the key things that we coach people to do is make sure that you're only giving people access to the functionality and capabilities that they need to have. One, that makes it a lot easier for them to ramp up without having to know everything. Two, it legitimately keeps them from doing something that they shouldn't be able to do and causing bad things to happen. So this is the site that we built, typical insurance site, set up, it's got different types of insurance. One of the other key concepts I wanted to talk to you guys about within Drupal is a content type itself. Is anybody not familiar with that term? Everyone know what a content type is? So if you have a content type, and I'll go through this really fast so everyone knows what it is, it's essentially taking a faculty member could be a content type. And what that means is faculty is going to have a picture, they're going to have a name, they're going to have classes that they teach, they're going to have this set of things that's essentially a Madlib, it's a fill in the blank that somebody has created to go in and say this is what it means to be a content, this is what it means to be this particular content type. So in our case, on this site, these types of insurance are a product content type. And the editing that we've gone and set up is relatively sophisticated. So you have things like the title, the body of this actual page that makes up the product information. You have all the different media pieces associated with it, or different fields that have been filled out. So the hero image, the icon that represents it. These are all different fields that make up what a product object is within the system. We even have some additional fields for if this object is called out from somewhere else on the site, this is the type of thing that we want to be able to say, these are the fields that make that up. What this allows us to do from a Drupal perspective is go in and I can have this auto insurance page. So I can have this auto insurance page, someone can come in, they can edit the quote, they can edit the body of the page. That single piece of content, then on the front page of the site, so from that single piece of content, it's pulling in this same text on the call out. So what I can do with Drupal from a content authoring experience is set up a type of content like product. Have people fill in all the detail around what a product is there. And then when they go through, if I want to have a menu or I want to show pieces of that content somewhere else, I can slice and dice it and show it in that piece. Does that make sense? We see people do things, some pretty incredible things with that. So, a site that I like to show to kind of illustrate this concept is BBC Good Food. So BBC Good Food is essentially the food network in the UK. They have this site, typical, full of recipes, full of things that their shows do. And you look at what they're able to do. We'll pick a dish that I have never heard of, so Toad in the Hole in 4 Easy Steps. You think about, a recipe as a type of content. And this really starts to illustrate what the power of Drupal is. So, I have the title of this, Toad in the Hole in 4 Easy Steps. I have a description of it. I have different attributes of that content, like the prep time, the cook time, its difficulty. I have some of its nutritional information. And then I also have its ingredients. And what's interesting about the ingredients is this is a relationship between this recipe as a recipe content type and ingredients as a content type. So because this content is now structured and organized, I can have a recipe that references an ingredient, and an ingredient I can go and look at onions, and I can see all of the recipes that have onion as part of them. I can see information about onions, I can see that. So by structuring the content within those content types, you can also then relate the content types to one another. And that's what they do further on in the site. So by having all of this content structured within the system, I can go and I can show something like alternative recipes. I can show related guides. I can show sides that go well with this. And it's able to do that because all of this content is related within the system. And we see this, in higher education and other areas as well. This is the Clark University website. Let me go pull it up. So this is the Clark University website, new homepage they launched on Drupal earlier this year. One of the things that they did is really spend some time on the pages for their programs and their different degree programs in the different colleges. And so within this site, you have the same things. You have these things that would be edited by an end user and filled out. So the description of the actual program, some bullet points about why it's an interesting program. But then when this page is actually created, it also brings in this faculty profile. And this is actually a different piece of content that's being assembled into this existing page. And then, the coursework, the research and creative work, the student experience, these are all just fields that have been created as this type of content program. And what this allows us to do is then when we're turning around to our content authors, rather than having to ask them to know HTML or know how to build out, themes or add modules, when we go to the content authors themselves, we can go in and say, when you're responsible for this program, or you're responsible for this individual piece of content, all I need you to do is basically go edit that page and fill in the blanks. And so the interface that they see just allows them to take those specific things, fill that out, and then how the page is presented, how it looks, how it's given to all of them is determined by the system itself. So that's been really important for us in separating the content author experience from the people needing to design and create the pages. It's got a benefit to it. You're taking away some flexibility that users could potentially have. And you're taking away that flexibility so that it's easier for them and that you also have more control over it. So we work with a lot of different groups and universities are one of them where accessibility is very, very important. In taking away some of this flexibility, you actually can enforce stronger accessibility. The other thing that you can do within the system is enforce some approval workflow for an individual piece of content. That's what I'll show you next. But any questions on any of this? All make sense? Too low level, not deep enough? Perfect. All right, let's make it sure. Now, one of the things that we saw is even this interface can be a little challenging. It gives you a lot of power, so I can go in and as I'm editing this piece of content, I can also determine how I want it to show in the menu. I can determine the meta tags that are going to be as part of the page, so I can determine its title, its description, any of its keywords. I can actually go in and give it a unique URL, or I can have it automatically generate a URL based on a pattern that's built into the system that a developer has set together. I can do things like set it to be published in the future, different things about how it's published. So I can do a lot with this interface. One of the things that we've seen is, sometimes even this can be a little bit daunting for a content author. And so what we've also done with Lightning in particular, and with some of the capabilities of Drupal, when I have access and the ability to edit a page, I can go in and actually, within the page itself, looking at it as a visitor would, if I have access, I can go in and edit those specific areas of the pages that I have the ability to go in and edit. So if I'm looking at, and I'm on my auto insurance page and I've got this detailed body, I can actually go and edit that text directly there. I really don't like conjunctions in my detail. So there's different things that I can go and do and actually edit directly in the page. That can be pretty powerful. And then the other thing that I have within the system so that's giving people this ability to edit in both ways. So some people want to get in and they just want to fill in the blanks and that's the interface they want to see. Some people may not know where that blank is, and so what I want to give them is the ability on the page to just directly click something and actually edit it. Some of the other things and the capabilities we've opened up, and again, this can all be determined by if a user has this ability. This is a module called Panels that's part of Lightning. The layouts for these pages are customizable. So all the different types of pages and products and those have a basic layout that they sort of ship with, and if you create a new page, they're going to have that default layout. But as long as I have the permissions, I can go in and take any of those layouts and any of those pages and move them around. So if I want to have this menu of my products actually go in above the quote, I can go and do that. And this is, again, another capability that Drupal, without having to ask anybody to write code, or without having to force them to understand a template file or open up something and actually edit it, I can instead give them an interface to actually lay out their page the way they want it to. And the thing that you have to think about as people setting up this system potentially for end users is, all this is great, I always want to think about giving people the right amount of control and flexibility for their skill set and how I'm willing to train and support them. That's the biggest thing. But so that goes through on all these different pages. I can go through and I can edit the home page of a site. I can go back to one of my little individual pages and I can actually, edit the layout of this page and save it as custom. So again, this is a lot of capabilities from an interface perspective that a relatively non-technical person can actually pick up, and you can give them a lot of power to actually go and manage their site. Does that make sense to everybody? The other thing that we've seen, and another key part of what we did within Lightning, was that a lot of organizations need some sort of approval workflow as people are managing content to make sure that it's reviewed and approved before it actually goes live to the public. So within this system, and you probably see me trying to avoid doing it on this page, I actually, depending on my role, may only be able to move content in certain types of states. So, and this is a state that it exists in. So right now, I'm working on a draft of this piece of content. Within the system, we have draft, needs review, and publish. But that's something that's fully customizable. We just set a really simple, content's created, it goes to be reviewed, whoever reviews it goes in and actually publishes it. But what this allows you to do is go in and say, okay, I've made this change. I can go in and send it for review, and then somebody else with a different role, if I didn't actually just break my site. When that goes through the system, it goes to somebody with a different role who actually sees, here's all the different revisions, here's what's actually live, here's one that's actually sitting that I need to review to actually make sure it publishes, and I can actually go send that to somebody from an editorial perspective and have them review different pieces of content before they're actually published. And this is something that we see come up in some different ways. From a Drupal perspective, you can set it up where only certain types of content require this, only content in certain areas require this, only certain people require this when they're creating content. But this piece of the system allows you to go through, see a piece of content, I can actually go through and pick two pieces of content and actually compare them. And the system will go through and show me exactly what's been changed between those two, line by line, what's been added, what's been subtracted. And so as an author, I can go not just, hey, let me see this piece of content, I can actually go and ask the system to specifically compare those revisions for me. When everything looks good, then myself as a moderator, I can go say, this looks great, and I can publish it. Or I can say, you know what, this isn't quite good enough, go back and I'm going to kick this back to draft and say this needs some work. And so what this does is allows you to have multiple people working on content and be able to pass the pieces of content back and forth between them. Is anybody using that now? Functionality like that? So this is a module bundled into Lightning called Workbench that allows you to do this, and it adds all these capabilities out of the box. And so that's something you think about, sort of the power of Drupal. It comes up in your organization, well, we really want to have more people be able to edit the content, but we'd really like to have marketing or somebody look at that before it's actually put live on the web. Rather than having to go in and develop how that is and spend a lot of time, there's a single Drupal module that can be added and configured that gives you all that functionality and all that interface out of the box. Now, one of the other things that's really interesting about this idea of content types in Drupal and being able to do this, I've got all the different types of content that can be created. One of the other things that's built into Lightning is, all right, so we're making these great fill-in-the-blanks for our content authors to actually be able to go in and fill out. Why couldn't I do that for the end users? Let me show this real quick. So one of the other capabilities within Drupal, if you think about this idea of content, is let's say I've got a lot of people on, within my organization who want to be able to fill out a form that a visitor to the website can fill out and look through that. So web form, something built into Lightning, it's another set of modules that can be added. What this allows you to do is basically create a content type in an easier way so that one of your organizational users could go in and say, you know what, I want to have a place that people can come and sign up and give me their email address and their name. And so this allows, again, relatively non-technical people to go in, create a form, and then that form is collected as Drupal data like anything else would be. So again, it's just one of those things that once you get the system in place, there's a lot of capabilities you can put in the hands of, again, relatively non-technical people to be able to change and manage and work in the system itself. Any questions on any of that?
Is it really that simple that you just figure it out and
Let me go actually edit it. Let me see if there's actually one in the system. It's already been done. So let me go, I'm going to look at, so this is a view of all my content. I want to look at web forms in particular. So let me go finish creating it so we can look at it. So let's do something simple. I want to do, let's go ahead and build it. Just real quickly while we're in here, you might as well see there's great things I can do in web form, like I can determine whether this can be required, whether it has to be unique, and so this will actually check and make sure that other people haven't used that. There's a lot of things I can do that actually choose how that field works. Of course, I don't know what's going on. All right, now when I actually look at this form, can't go by their email, so we're going to do I'm going to confirm it. Oh, I said to where it hit confirm it. It's actually because it's an email field, it's going to force me to validate that that's an actual email. So I've gone through and I created that form. I filled in my email as a user, and then as those, I can go in, and then all the results, the system's going to collect, and it's going to collect who actually did it, what the actual submission was that was created, things like what IP it came from. It'll also give me analysis on it, so I can go through and I can actually look at a component, I can see who filled it out, who left it blank, what the most common values were. So I can do things like build those web forms within the system. So a couple of the other things that we've seen, a lot of times now that mobile is so prevalent, it's great that people can drag and drop and they can change the layout of their page. We also want them to give them the ability to go and preview those changes and things are making the content on a mobile device. And so built into this is some emulator capabilities where I can go in, I can say, okay, that's great, I want to see what this is going to look like on an iPhone. I want to check it for both, if it's being held vertically or it's being held horizontally. I want to see how that works. I can go in and do all that from the system itself. I can actually go through, and this is something, one of the clients I had in the central US was Whole Foods. And you think about Whole Foods, they actually do something like 25% of their annual revenue. It's almost like any retail group. It comes from Thanksgiving to Christmas and all the holiday meals. It's a huge piece of Whole Foods revenue. So they have a lot of things that go on when it's coming to Thanksgiving and how they're going to have Thanksgiving dinner. So they actually prepare a lot of changes to their site that need to go live. So it's not like they just need to edit a couple of products or a couple of sections of the site. They almost have to do this whole different view of the site that gets ready to go when it's live for Thanksgiving. And that's another thing that I can actually do with Drupal is, rather than having to do, all of these content changes one-off, I can actually set up a set of changes that go live together. So, we've kind of talked about this. There's so much you can do with Drupal, and it's all about just putting the right capabilities you need in place to get what you need, but not giving you so much that you get lost in it. What else do you guys want to see? I want to look at.
Is there a special term for what you were calling those holiday views or Whole Foods? I mean,
Oh,
what's
this
the
is.
keyword that what would that be called?
So the module is called the Site Preview System. And it creates collections. Collections is the Drupal term of content. So I have my content types. When I create a piece of content within one of those content types, I'm creating a node. And a collection is just a grouping of nodes. I try and say node never, but for the sake of this, I'll say it. So any other thoughts or specific things you want to see?
So you showed us the view for iPhones now.
Yep.
And is that a capability that Drupal 7 has?
Yes. Again, this is an actual Drupal 7 site. It's using Lightning, so there's a set of features and modules that have been pre-built into it, but all of those are modules that exist and could be added to an existing site. And we've seen this a lot of times. People right now are sort of at this, stage of choosing between Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 for new sites. Where one of the things that an advantage Lightning has is you can start with Drupal 7, which if you're familiar with it, it could be a really good place to start. But you're going to put yourself in a really good position to have parity with Drupal 8. And if you're doing a Drupal 8 project, it bundles a lot of the well-working, well-established modules right out of the gate. So it's a really great place to start with Drupal 8. Anything else like that? Anything that you guys have in your Drupal sites that you wish they could do and don't think they can? Drupal's been able to do everything that you guys have hoped it would be able to do, or you expect it to be able to.
So I will say that in the afternoon we'll have people, Thad maybe, or others of us, that will be in the conference room over there where we ate donuts and everything like that. If you want something specific, if you want to see how to actually install Drupal really easily on your laptops and get it running, Acquia provides a really nice application to do that. You don't have to know anything about web servers or databases. We can show you that in the computer lab. So yeah, feel free to come to any of us when we're in there. I'll especially be there, and a few of the speakers that you'll see after lunch. I think we'll have a lot of time if you just want to have questions or just want to set something up real quickly. The application that Acquia has put out for Drupal, seriously, is just so simple just to try anything out without having any knowledge of any IT stuff. You can just download, install modules, and kind of just go at one little thing and just have it running on your laptop and not have to worry about anything.
Yeah, for anybody who wants to try this out or get started, the tool he's talking about is called Dev Desktop. I can have Alan, you send around links to it. Dev Desktop puts this little thing down on your Windows or Mac machine that basically runs Drupal for you. And then what you can actually do is within that system, you can go and say, hey, I want to start a new Drupal site. If you guys are really new to Drupal or just want to try it out, I would absolutely start with Lightning. But you could also start out with basic Drupal 8, basic Drupal 7. There are a lot of these different pre-built Lego sets, things for, commerce and building a store. GovCMS is actually one that the Australian government has put together for government sites. Open Atrium, I think, it does a lot of community and intranet functionality that are pre-built. But certainly is a place to start from basic website building. Lightning is going to put you into something that feels a lot more familiar out of the gate than just starting with Drupal core itself. But you can do all of that with Dev Desktop on your own. The things that I would encourage you to do if you're going to do that and be new to Drupal, Drupalize.me does have a lot of very basic resources that you can get to out of the gate. There's also Acquia Academy, which has a lot of free resources for going in and just getting some basics for how to do things in Drupal. And so as you're trying it out, go in and look at some of those resources ahead of time, before time, as you're doing it, because they really will help you sort of gain an understanding initially versus just getting in and saying, what is this? All right, well, in the time we have, I'm going to show you the thing I never show for the sake of let's show it. So the most powerful, in my opinion, having sold against it and sold it, component of Drupal is the concept of views. And a view can do some incredible things. This module right here that shows this menu of all the products I have is a view. And what a view is essentially asking the Drupal system to go in and query a specific set of pieces of content based on criteria. So who's scared of this interface that I just brought up? Okay. So what this interface does, and this is something that as a content author you may never need to see, probably will never need to see. But as you start getting more advanced in your understanding of Drupal, if you are a content author that can start to understand this, it's going to give you a lot of capabilities that, again, even without being a developer, you can do some pretty interesting things. So what I actually do with this is say, here's this view. What I'm going to do is I want content that's published. So I've got my little filter criteria. So I want to see published content, not content that's waiting to be reviewed, not content that's in draft. I want to see published content, and I just want to see insurance products. And here are the actual fields that I want to get. So you think about, I've created that Mad Lib of a content type, what a product is. Here's the 5 things I want to show about a product. And I want to pull that slice of the products I have in my system. And that allows you to go through, and I get my little icon image, I get my little text that somebody has filled out. Suddenly I have this nice little menu of the insurance products that I have on the site. Now, anytime somebody edits their insurance product that they're responsible for, this is going to automatically get updated. So if I change auto insurance to car insurance, that's going to go through everywhere that piece of content is referenced on the site. And that can be really powerful, and that's why folks like Clark University can go in and they can have all these programs and then all these faculty profiles, and they can put them in different places on the site in different ways. Those are all done by creating these different views of content. And then the thing that I'm seeing more and more, both on the commercial side and in higher ed with other organizations, it's like, okay, well, we've got all of this great content within the system. If I know somebody is interested in the biology program, and they visited that site a couple times, why would I show them a faculty profile from engineering? When if I know that about that person, and I can go in and, I've got profiles of different things, I can actually use views and some of the functionality of Drupal, because all this content is structured, to start personalizing the content that somebody sees based on things that I've learned about them. So there's sort of these foundational pieces of Drupal that's great. I can go and I can very easily create a page. I can lay out my page, like if I want to go and show this as well. I just want to show you guys real quick. Page. You know, I want it to be easy for somebody to go have a landing page that they create, and you know, now I've got this page, and you know, I've created it new in the system. I'm starting from scratch. I'm going to go in and I'm going to start doing things like, you know, adding hero images, you know, adding slideshows, you know, adding all these components, adding text to this page. I want to make it really easy for people to add content to the system. But the way that I'm structuring that content in Drupal means that if I can, once I've got them as a developer or site administrator to add and manage all this content, I can start to do some really creative things with it. Things that with other systems and with previous systems were actually impossible to do. But all of that doesn't matter if I can't make it really, really easy for people to actually create the content itself. And that's it, without going too much deeper into any particular thing. So, any questions? Anything anyone else wants to see?
Yeah, do you have a little bit more about how you're personalizing that content?
Yeah, so there's two ways to do it, and one of them gets sales pitchy. So the one that's not sales pitchy, there are things that you can learn about a user based on specific things they tell you or about how they're browsing the site. So the one that I know most closely is when somebody comes to ASU Online, if they come from a military IP address, that is a variable that Drupal has access to. They, within this hero image that's just a view, so this slideshow is just a view, they have set up that view that if that military IP address is flagged, this hero image and the story down here are targeted at the military. And they know that if they do that, they actually have a 30% increase of people who click this. So there's certain things that Drupal knows as variables about people that you can use as conditional pieces of a view to show up. It's not something that's where you start to need some expertise with Drupal development. What we have, and it's a little bit salesy, so I don't just want to pitch Acquia stuff. We actually built a product called Lift that sits on top of Drupal. So Drupal as itself has all the capabilities to go in and do this. But what Drupal doesn't have within its system itself is some of the brains to really think about comparing different types of content that might work better than most. And so what we did with Lyft is I have this insurance company site. I want to go and set it up so that if somebody shows me that they're interested in auto insurance, I show auto insurance information. And let me actually pause this so I can edit it for you guys. But what this is going to allow me to do is within Lyft, and Lyft again is an Acquia product that ties into what you're doing with Drupal, I can actually go and have variants of the site. So I can go and say, okay, here's one variant, here's another. So I can actually tell it pieces of the site I want to change. And that all, again, is just Drupal content. I can actually tell it why I want to change that. And this is actually where I go in and set up goals that it's going to track and measure the content against. And so these goals are things like clicking a specific action item, just viewing another page, viewing all the way to the bottom of the page. That actually, the simplistic way to describe that is that scores points for that piece of content. And then I can also tell it who I actually want to do that for. So in this case, I want to show this for people that have shown an interest in auto insurance, what Lyft does outside of Drupal from an Acquia perspective is it segments people. So it looks at how they're viewing the site and it drops them into buckets that you can target content against. And then it'll actually test the types of content and the variants and say, you know what? For people that fit this bucket, if you show them this piece of content, it actually produces this result more consistently. And you can actually set it up to eventually declare a winner and say, you know what? This one is so much better than any of the other pieces of content, I only want to show it. But that's using the capabilities Drupal has. What Drupal didn't have was sort of the machine brain there to make those decisions and track it, and that's what we kind of came in. We saw a lot of people using Optimizely or other systems and pulling their hair out because it's like, well, now we have taught the people how to edit the content in this one system, but these variants of content they're expected to add in another. How can we do that better? And so Lyft was sort of branch out of that. But that's actually, Clark University does it, where if you go, as you spend some time on their site, it'll try and peg you as either an undergraduate student, a graduate student, and what program you're looking for. So eventually it'll come through and these different fields and different pieces will actually pre-populate based on how you're using the site. And then if you think about Whole Foods, who is somebody else who's using it, or even BBC Good Food uses it as well, the last thing you want to do is show your steak special to a vegetarian. It's the most wasted real estate you could do. But again, all of that comes from the fact that how content is structured in Drupal. If you didn't have that, none of the other bells and whistles would be possible.
Once you set that into motion, are you kind of stuck with that? Say a vegetarian has friends over that are meat eaters, and they want to see the meat stuff. Are they able to access that content still, or is there?
Yeah, so there's nothing that keeps that content away from them. So this is the danger. I actually talked USC library out of doing this because they had this grand vision for using it with doctoral students and people with research, like their research and recommending research resources. And it's like, great, last person to do their term paper, it's going to be so easy because as soon as it flags it, they're going to see every other resource. So that comes down to how it is implemented and making sure that you haven't so personalized the site that the other stuff is completely not found. So it's well done when it's more about surfacing the right content, but never sticking people so that's the only thing they see, and always giving them some interface element to go see everything else. It's meant to be more nice little recommendations in the interface versus this is the only thing, the only place you ever can be, the only content you can see. And then the only other flip side of that, depending on the different organizations here, you can also collect all of that information you learn about a user and give it to another system if you have it. So, when somebody, if you guys ever call Acquia.com, and you've ever signed up for a webinar or signed up to download a resource, we know that about you, and we see that in our systems. And that can actually be really valuable for recruitment or for sales or for customer support, knowing what people are interested in as they're using your site. Anything else? Anything you guys hoped to see but didn't? It wasn't that good, so I refuse to believe that. But could definitely show you some other stuff. And then in the higher ed session later today, I'm going to show some specific things people have done in higher ed, whether it's faculty profiles or intranets or some of the different portal things that they've done. Is that good? That's all I got.
Thank you so much.